of, I don't know what we're gonna call it. I've had a couple of titles kicking around in my head that I have no idea. One, and I think my favorite, not because I think it's any good, just because it's a good meme, but it really is like the dumbest title that I could think of, was two bros chilling in a podcast 6 feet apart, because those are the rules. And it was that one, and my other favorite one, at a couple other ones, was two bards, one podcast.
Mm,
There was I had a couple like bard based ones, because that's really, you and I are the modern day
yeah.
equivalent of shitty fifth edition bards.
Even
Um,
though I think both of us have played, like between the two of us, I think we represent two actual fifth edition bard characters total
yeah,
in
well,
the
I mean,
dozens that we've played.
of the many different characters, of the slew of fighters that I have just forced out into the universe. And then there's, I think my favorite one was two idiots with approximate knowledge.
Ah,
Um,
I like that.
I think that may be the one I want to go with, because I think that
I, I
was, I
I
think,
do
my
like that.
favorite. But we are, yeah, we're live, barring any weirdness. If I have to take a live lead call, that is just what it is. And everybody who's watching the VOD and everybody who's listening live can have the fun little snippet of, oh my goodness, the real life and stuff. And everybody who is listening to the audio version of this, we may just leave it in for the fun, and Brendan can dance, and keep you guys entertained. But I am one of your hosts. I am Nathan. Some of you may know me on Twitter and here in Twitch, and probably on YouTube as Roby1Kenobi91, and this is my co-host.
I'm Brennan. My name everywhere on every social media is either my full name or Bren Bricks. Um, yeah, you may have seen one of the like 3 videos I've posted on YouTube. I don't do a lot of Twitch, but we'll see.
Yeah, and oh man, I'm gonna kind of, what I've been doing to like check my audio levels is just I've been keeping an eye on the slider bar for like where the audio mix is, to kind of decide like, okay, I'm good, but maybe I need to turn him down or whatever, because this is what happens
Hmm.
when you just do things off the cuff, like I tend to do, where I'm a very manic person in that regard, where I just make decisions and just go.
It's session 0. I mean, there's weirdness is expected.
Yes, and we kind of have like a weird monopoly when it comes to weirdness and the decision making that we have. But I actually gotta
It's
double
what the
check
people
this real
want.
quick. One way or another, even if they don't know it.
Exactly. We know best.
Yeah, no kidding. So, a little background on me. I have I have a weird background. My background is in a couple different places. Some of it is in theater. A little bit of it is in education. I used to be a retail worker. Before that, I was a voice teacher. Before that, I did a lot of like camp counseling and stuff like that. I am a trained baritone. I have a degree in classical music, of all freaking things. And right
Nathan, you can't
now,
you can't tell him that. No, Nathan, you can't tell him that.
it's too late. I've already thrown it out into the ether.
They're
They know
gonna
now.
they're gonna bully us on Twitter. They're gonna make us sing.
Well, I'll fight them. I have a baseball bat and a Nerf gun. We can do this. We'll hold out. It'll be fine. But on top of that, I also am a real estate agent here in Washington State. So I'm gonna try and be somewhat professional on this. And if I'm not, I just want to apologize to my managing and both my managing and designated broker in advance. But I can offer more than just insight when it comes to not just music and the little amount of gaming insight that I can offer, as well as like, the social insights that I have. But I can also show you guys how to buy a house. It's actually something that I can show you guys how to do. We're gonna leave the microphone in frame, because why not?
It adds to the professionalism.
Yeah,
That's how you know it's a real
yeah, I
podcast.
got this
Yeah,
Audio Technica right here. It's all cool.
you gotta
And
have it right in the face.
what about you, Brennan?
Well, I am also a trained baritone. It's actually how Nathan and I met, was at musician school. You know, before back when music was allowed. Remember those times? Wasn't that nice? But I am currently working, well, was currently working as a voice teacher, running my own independent studio, and also just working as an independent teacher in other studios, doing jobs from time to time there. That's kind of shut down at the moment, but we're doing what we can. I don't have any insight in buying houses. You're going to have to go to Nathan for that. But I can talk about music, and I can talk about my own weird takes on video gaming and on D&D. So,
It's kind of interesting where our education. I was talking to my mother about this. We were walking the dogs today. And I was talking about how we have this kind of weird intersection where. I actually got to answer this question. I actually have to look this up. Hang on.
it's okay. We're going to cut all this out.
Entertain the message.
This is all going to get cut out in post.
Cool, perfect.
Except for the VOD, which we have no control over, but that's fine. Something I think is interesting, just like about my path leading me to where I am right now, is I actually originally intended to become a mechanical engineer. I went through all the math series and chemistry series and physics and stuff like that. I don't think I ever took the full physics series because by that point I had decided to change course entirely and become a musician. I actually, contrary to what some people might expect, it wasn't because I couldn't take the heat. I actually was doing really well, but I had a lot of life events going on, and I had that moment. I had done theater my whole life, and I had that moment where I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna try to pull the trigger on this and see where it goes, and accepted my offer from PLU, Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, which is where we both went for music. So I have this weird half recollection of all this scientific knowledge. Always weird to me. People will, like my sister, for example, who's majoring in psychology and linguistics, she'll ask me questions well, she won't necessarily ask me questions, but she'll be talking about this stuff, and my brain will just throw up a flag of like, hey, we know that. And I'm like, oh really, tell me. And the brain's just like, hey, we know that. That's about the extent of it.
It's funny. I kind of had that similar turn where I remember when I was in high school, kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what path I was going to take. And hang on, depends on the quality of the home.
I was just thinking it's kind of funny because you graduate from high school and you're kind of expected to know exactly what you want to do, because I feel like we've left behind the age when going to college was something you did to find out what you want to do. Nowadays, you go to college with a focused plan, or you come out of college with a debt that is unmanageable. Like for me, I had the advantage of doing the Running Start program in Washington State. It's a really great program. If other people are aware of it, it's essentially, it allows high school juniors and seniors to fulfill their course requirements while also receiving credit at community college institutions. I went to Highline College, but it's Olivia.
Hi, Olivia.
Yeah, we're recording a session 0 of our podcast.
Okay.
You need something?
For your book.
It's right there on the counter.
Okay. Podcast. That's awesome. All right. Edit me out.
It's okay. Olivia is covering. I got a book. Segueing into my other niche interests, I got a book for my birthday about the history of medieval armor and its evolution from the 11th century until the 17th century. And it's a fairly valuable book, and it's pretty old. So she worked in archives, so she gets a kick out of doing stuff like this. So she got a bunch of like dust jacket protectors and is putting them on all of our old books, including that one.
That's really cool. We'll definitely delve into making fun of your Euroweebism later. But yeah,
perfect.
what I was gonna say is when I got out of high school, like I was so mixed up with like what I wanted to do with my life when I was even in high school, because I had this idea. I don't know, even I don't remember where I got it from, but I thought, oh, maybe I could be a lawyer. That's something that like grown-ups do. And then I ended up going to school. My original path was majoring in theater, and it was double me majoring in theater and music, which I don't recommend to anybody. Not necessarily because it's a bad career path, because like especially if you're going to like musical theater or opera, those two can go hand in hand. The issue that I ran into is that like if I wanted to do those, I would have needed to then. um, I would have spent a lot more time at this college that is going to remain unnamed right now because to heck with them. But two, I didn't actually take any theater classes my first year, and they told me you can keep the theater scholarship. We don't really care right now, but like, drop the theater major. And I was like, done.
You drive a hard bargain, sir.
Yeah, exactly. And then like just kind of going through life trying to figure out what to do, because the kicker here in where I live in Washington, not a lot of jobs at the music factory, which is what drove me to retail and grocery. And then after that, I got picked up by a real estate firm, which has been fantastic. The hours are weird, like things are weird with the pandemic, but like the worst of it in terms of the real estate business has passed, and people are returning back to shopping as normal. Because like if you're, the unfortunate thing is like what 14.9% of Americans, something like that, we'll call it 14% right now, is unemployed, and that sucks. That's horrible. 86% are still employed, 86% are still working. I hate saying this. Part of that 14 cent there's a portion of that 14% that wasn't going to be shopping for homes anyway, and the rest of them were going to move forward with that plan either way. We've been affected, but not in I think the way people expected us to be affected, because, and this is kind of the crazy thing about the financial sector here, it just keeps going. But
And people still need homes.
yeah, and like the other thing that I'm kind of like weirded out about is that everybody is expecting like this housing market crash, because like, you know, other stuff is kind of sort of come apart. Imagine that being frustrating. I have a client from Canada who, like, I guess in Canada, of course in Canada, real estate is a little bit different. And, like, she's fairly well versed in Canadian real estate, and not here in the US where, you know, her husband is. And, like, she's a little frustrated with things, and I don't blame her, because we do things kind of stupid here sometimes. But digression aside, yeah, it's just kind of an interesting, we're not going to experience the 2008 housing market crash. We've seen a little bit of dip in prices, but I think that's more just kind of what happens in the summer, is like list prices go down because they're expecting people to put in more bigger offers anyway. Because you're competing and stuff like that, especially with a not as big an inventory as what we would traditionally have. But again, like, I'm sure the housing market is going to be fine. There's no reason for it to do anything really stupid here.
Music market, less so.
Yeah, well, you know, music is weird too, because I don't know, if you're managing to make money on Spotify, God bless you, first of all, and you know, teach us the ways.
My understanding was that the official recommendation of Nats, and you know, before I spout misinformation, I'm going to look this up really quick. They were talking about when they think people should go back to in-person lessons. Just find this here. Because I know for me, my studio's closed. And the one of the other studios that I've worked at is no longer taking in-person lessons. Because what I had heard was that they were recommending not doing any of that until, at least for another year, or until there's a vaccine. Here, let's see. Person lessons recommendation. COVID-19.
Well, I know that they're talking about
Here we go.
with because like everything is moving in phases, and Washington has its own plans. I guess I don't know how it is where you're at, but here in Clark County, we're actually considering applying for phase 2. I think there's a fairly good chance that we'll get approved. Thankfully, Washington or like Clark County has not been hit too terribly hard. I mean, it's affected us, but it's not been as horrible as it's been across the board. And again, it's worth noting, not to get too political or whatever, but I don't even see this as a political issue. Just, is I cannot fathom why this is being considered a political issue, because the fact that people are dead shouldn't be political. But anyway, like here in Clark County, we have under 400 confirmed cases and only 22 deaths. Which is, I have to assume those numbers are underreported, because that's kind of the issue that we're having. We're not, not enough tests, all that kind of stuff. But like that is, far cry from the 18,000 that we have here in Washington, and the 1.56 million confirmed cases here.
Well, and in King County, where I'm living, there's 7,500 confirmed cases and over 500 deaths.
I gotta hope that here in Clark County we just took it seriously enough, and we have enough people. Like a lot of it's funny. A lot of the business owners that we have, both large and small, have been very much like, yeah, we'll survive. We'll take the hit now because we'll survive as a business, but more importantly, you need to survive as individual people. Like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I completely agree.
It's just this
well, I can't find
ridiculous crap.
I can't find it, but I mean, I do know that a lot of Nats concerts and events were canceled for the next season. And people are probably going to be a little bit wary about doing things like going to voice lessons, even when we're allowed to do that again.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be interesting. I've actually thought about getting back in contact with the old studio I used to work with, and letting them know, like, I don't work for retail anymore. Like, because they have fairly flexible hours, I could probably keep studio hours or something. But at this point, it'd be virtual lessons, which actually could work out pretty well, especially with the setup that I have.
Yeah, I don't have a great setup for that, so I haven't been doing it. I also just, since I don't think I've done as much teaching as you have, I just started my studio, and I didn't really want to be throwing that in the mix, especially since I'm not sure I could get enough students anyway.
You never know.
It's true.
So,
but anyway,
to dial back, to kind of get away from more serious topics and get into maybe more stupid stuff. The whole reason why we started this is one, like, we just find excuses to hang out regularly. That's one of the things we've talked about, is like we'll have a session of D&D or something like that, and then like maybe it ends earlier. Maybe the very few times that we've hung out and like played games online, we're just like, oh, we need to do this more often, and this is a good excuse to just like hang out and everything. But it's based off of that string of tweets that you made, missing out on great older games.
Yes.
And it's funny that you would bring that up, because I've suffered the same thing to a certain extent. The KOTOR games I didn't play until like 2015 or something like that. I have never played the original Witcher. I've actually been told, like, don't worry about the first Witcher game. It can be pretty well summed up. I've played some of the older Star Wars games. Not that I really remember any of them. And there's a lot of the older Star Wars games I don't recommend anyway, just because they're kind of hot garbage. It was back when LucasArts was trying to figure out how to make a game.
Yeah. I didn't have it in front of me when I made the post, but I remember I purchased when I bought the classic Star Wars Battlefront 2, the one from 2005, on Steam. They were having a sale on like a Star Wars collection, which contained a crap ton of these old Star Wars games, all bundled up. Games that were for sale for like $5 or less. And so I ended up with a Steam library full of these old Star Wars games, and most of them I haven't even installed. There's a few that people have just said. I've heard a lot of people on YouTube, for example, talking about how great they are. But of them, KOTOR, I was the first one that I really did because I played Star Wars: The Old Republic a fair amount. That's the new one, well, newish now. The one that BioWare, I believe, is still supporting. But a buddy of mine and I, we played that game for a very long time, and I kept hearing from everybody that I needed to play KOTOR, that it was the best Star Wars story ever. So I installed it, I booted it up, and I played it for a while, and it was fun. Like, I could get into it and play it for a good few play sessions, but it got to the point where, like I was saying in that Twitter thread, it got to the point where I was just like, these controls, I feel like, are limiting my enjoyment to the game to a point that is no longer really acceptable to me. And whatever it was, I just didn't find myself opening that game up after the first few sessions. And
so
the
interesting thing about that is I was actually just I was tweeting at Macy a little bit a couple days ago, kind of related to that, because I guess she's been going back and playing a couple like older shooters and stuff like that. I think Cameron is having her like hang out and play some of these games, and I think she's playing the Uncharted franchise right now, which I've never played, but I know is fantastic. But she was playing Resident Evil 5 for a little while, and like at the time of release, Resident Evil 5, in terms of the way it played, absolutely fantastic. It was rolling off of the kind of redesign and reshuffle of the franchise that Resident Evil 4 had. I don't know how familiar you are with that franchise. What it used to be is that they would, and this was, back in PlayStation 1 era, where this kind of made sense to do in terms of a graphical perspective. Everything was on a pre-rendered environment, which was fairly common in PlayStation 1 era. So you could just have the environment pre-rendered and then set your boundaries of where the character can traverse and interact. And it limits the amount of animation and rendering that the game has to do. Which is why, especially in like late PlayStation 1, and we look at it now and it looks so archaic and crappy, but at the time, why some of those models looked so good, or at least were as detailed as they were, because they could dedicate a lot of that power to that and just have what was essentially a giant JPEG with boundaries.
Yeah.
The original Resident Evil games were like that up to like Resident Evil 3 and some of the other games that came out after that. Like I think Code Veronica was one of them, but that might have been later once they moved on to the next generation of consoles. Anyway, the other thing about those controls is that it used what we refer to as tank controls, where if you press, like if you're navigating the scene, the camera is always static in any of those given scenarios, because it's on this it's on this pre-rendered background that doesn't move or anything like that. It is, again, like I said,
right.
It's multiple images, these fair for the time high resolution images, so you have these detailed backgrounds. If you were moving around in the environment and you hold up on, let's say, the joystick, that is not going to be up relative to the map. That is forward relative to your facing.
Oh, I know what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about that is, like, if you know what you're doing, if you get used to it, like, if you started at Resident Evil 1 and just suffered through it, by the time you get to Resident Evil 2 and 3, like, it's ingrained in your system and you
Yeah.
get it. And if you played other games of that era, it clicks, it makes sense to that point. Part of what made those games scary wasn't just the fact that it was, you know, a 3D horror environment, and 3D is where you can start, like, really kind of pushing horror as a genre in gaming. It's hard to do in 2D. You can still do it, but it's different. You have part of what made that game scary and unnerving is the fact that some of your enemies were the zombies and the dogs and all that crap, and some of it was the controls.
Yeah.
Controls are a choice, and you can make them as flowy or clunky as you need to be, but they need to fit within the game. And luckily for those older Resident Evil games, and I'm sure if I went back and played them, I would have a different opinion of it now. But at the time, it made sense. It worked. So then you have this drastic redesign in Resident Evil 4 where they have, at the time, it was the amazing processing power of the GameCube, which, take that for what it's worth. It was a powerful little console for what it was.
Well, sure.
But instead of these static pre-rendered backgrounds, everything was rendered in real time. So what they were able to then do was, instead of taking that static fixed camera angle, and they decided to do a fairly close in over the shoulder perspective for everything. So you knew where you were aiming. They gave everything a little laser pointer. Anytime you stopped, if you needed to fire your weapon, you stopped and you aimed, just like in the older games. But now you have a very good idea of where you are shooting at the time. In the moment, it was really good. It was a huge step forward for third-person shooters as a genre. The fact that, you know, you could stay as mobile as you needed to, you stop and aim and then continue what you're doing. And a lot of games have followed suit in some way. It's the joke is X could walk so Y could run. Resident Evil 4 walked so that Gears of War could run, is kind of the way I've sort of looked at it. Resident Evil 5 just kind of capitalized on that and continued to build. The problem is that we have so many of these other really awesome third-person shooters, whether it's Gears of War or Uncharted or Tomb Raider, or take your pick of these really well-made games that control super, like, the controls on those are so tight. Resident Evil 5 by comparison is very clunky. And that's go ahead.
That's the point I was trying to make in that Twitter thread about the idea of innovation. Is just like you said, that control scheme in Resident Evil was very innovative when it came out, and that because of that level of innovation, when people played it for the first time on or near release, they were able to enjoy it a great deal because they were like, wow, this is a great step forward. They didn't know anything different. Whereas, as you say, now we have these other games with this really great control scheme. Even though you can appreciate the innovation of the old game for what it was and for its time, it's hard. A great deal of its value, I feel, has been reduced just because a lot of the value of it was, wow, this feels so much better than anything I've ever played. Whereas now you can never recapture that.
Yeah, it's definitely it's interesting because I remember going back and playing KOTOR, and it took me some time to get used to the interface, and even games that came like right after it, like I've played through Dragon Age 1 and 2. Dragon Age Origins, like, even the step between KOTOR and Dragon Age is significant. If you have you played Dragon Age at all?
I haven't actually. My exposure to gaming is very weird because I didn't really have access to any kind of gaming tech until I was like 16, 15. So until then, it was just whenever I was at someone else's house and we were playing like Halo or something. So my exposure to gaming is a little bit weird for someone of my age. I've played a lot of like the newer games, but not a lot of the games that were releasing in, like, you know, the 2010s. But anyway,
I think you would really enjoy the Dragon Age games because it's loosely based off of second edition rules.
Hmm.
Like KOTOR is mostly just like it's a D20 Star Wars system that they just made into a
Yeah.
game. And if you go even further back to games like Baldur's Gate, that's just second edition as a game.
Right.
It takes a little bit of liberties with it to make it feel a little more conducive to video gameplay, but like
Right.
the thing I had to get used to playing that game, because it's something that had never occurred to me, is the idea that you can pause the real-time action at any moment to start assigning orders. And like I struggled with that game for weeks, just trying to get through the game until I realized I need to like be willing to stop, assign my orders, and then continue on with the game, because I've gotten used to playing games like StarCraft and Command and Conquer,
Right.
where you have to make those decisions, often poor decisions, in real time. So the only thing that happened wasn't that my decision making got any better; it just got faster. I was still making the
Right.
same stupid moves, and the ability to stop time, assign your orders, really made the difference with that game, and you learn to, in the same way that in fifth edition that we play now, you learn to exploit the game to make things easy.
Right.
I have in Dragon Age, there were multiple moments where if I kind of had the sense that a fight was about to break out, like my first thought was, okay, who's positioned where, and how can I just like dunk on this whole fight, where I would, instead of like having the fight start someplace, I would take the guy who I knew could tank my mage's fireball just like that. I'd have him use its taunt, stand in the middle, everybody else backs up, and of course everybody just like, dog piles on him, and then boom.
Right.
He takes next to nothing, and then we just stab. And just get through him. It's interesting because like the Dragon Age games that followed suit did not run off of that system. They were much more like a little more action focused. They felt maybe they still had that like CRPG bent to them, but had maybe a little more of an action feel to them. It made them a lot more cinematic and probably a little more accessible to newer audiences. And at the same time, like, still super feel like Dragon Age games. It didn't take away from the experience. I know like Dragon Age 2 caught a little bit of flack because it was so different. And Dragon Age 3, though I haven't finished it, kind of takes cues from both games and mends them together pretty well.
Well, it's an interesting balance to take because, as you say, leaning more into that action cinematic experience, it can be more accessible to more audiences. Although I have to wonder now, with 5th edition's explosive popularity over the last few years, whether that would be changed. Like, for example, with Baldur's Gate 3, from the gameplay I've seen, it seems like they're leaning pretty heavily into that turn-based planning, stopping time style of combat, and I have to wonder if what is allowing them to feel confident releasing something like that is the current 5th edition climate, where D&D has gone from being a fringe thing to being, at least in the circles I run in, frankly, a normal part of popular culture.
I had clients touring with me on Saturday, and the guy was wearing a Critical Role jacket, and we talked about it.
Like, I think that that's so awesome. It's so great to me that Dungeons & Dragons has become this accessible thing, because I think so many people are kind of realizing how fun engaging in these kind of role play stories can be. And that's what I really love about 5th edition, is it kind of gets out of your way in a lot of ways, but it still has enough rules that people can power game if they want to. And we could talk about that, but yeah, I mean, we could talk about that. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that. I know some people can get a little bit annoyed when people do that, but I don't. My perspective on that has always been, if you're annoyed that someone at your table is power gaming, play a different system, because that's part of the system, is knowing how to play the system well. It
is very difficult in 5th edition to make suboptimal choices because it doesn't reward you for it. There's no intrinsic reward for engaging in suboptimal play.
And ironically, that is one of the few things that I actually dislike about 5th edition, is I feel, having been playing, you've been playing a little bit longer than me, but we've been playing for what, like 3 or 4 years now, it starts to feel like, at least for me, I start to feel like there's a limited number of archetypes I could play, and that I feel like you can explore a lot of creativity and a lot of different characters within the framework that 5th edition gives you, but I still feel like I'm operating under a very broad set of boundaries, if you will. And I think that's just an inherent limit of class-based role-playing systems, and that's fine. Like, that is an exchange that you make for accessibility. It's just one of the things that can stand out, I think, to me, is being like, well, why can't I make, why can't I make a grizzled fighter who has spent his life on the mean streets, and so has mostly specialized in like fighting with his fists and with non-lethal weapons? It's like, well, I could make a monk, but that's not really what the monk class is designed for. It's like, well, I guess I could make a barbarian, but that doesn't really make sense. It gets a little confusing.
You run into, and this is an important thing when it comes to role-playing games in general. 5th edition it is not a standout in this. It is not exempt from this. It is just one of many examples where it is up to you to have that conversation with whoever's running the game, and to an extent the people who are involved in that game too, to say like, hey, I would like to explore this concept. How can we make it work? What do we need to do?
Right.
Because I've become a much bigger fan of the idea of just like take something and put a different coat of paint on it, or file the serial numbers off. There's nothing wrong with that. Making that decision to be like, oh, like, we'll use this weapon but we'll call it something else. Or in the 20th level game that Cameron wants to run, like, I just took the heavy crossbow and I was like, can we just make it like a assault rifle or whatever? And he's like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. I often joke with him that I can trick him into letting me use anything, but I always try to respect that of like, okay, what would I allow in one of my games? Like, and trying to taper those expectations.
I think in fairness to Cameron, the game that he's running is going to be pretty off the rails, and
oh yeah,
in a good way, in a really very good way. And I think that, and even to some extent, I don't know what you guys have been doing in Everfall 2, but in Everfall 1, the first game that I was in, that he ran, that we were both in, it, towards the middle of the second act, it started to get pretty crazy. Like, really wild things were happening. We were facing these enemies that, I mean, the final boss ended up being like an entire country, wasn't it? Something like that. Like,
pretty much.
I think that your half of the party dealt more with that than we did. But the point that I'm trying to make is, when you have a game like that, I feel like it's very different when you have a game like that to do things like saying, you want to have an assault rifle? Sure, whatever. Like, you guys are going to be sailing through the astral plane on an airship. Like, you can have an assault rifle. That's not going to wreck anyone's immersion. Whereas if you wanted to run, for example, I'm running a game right now for, I think, Brianna, Dalton, Olivia, and then Gillian from PLU, and their game right now is like a very, very much like grounded in the tropes of fantasy. Like, they're swords and very limited sorcery. Like, they're dealing with conflicts between governments and little resistance groups. And I feel like in a game like that, if someone was like, yeah, I want to have a hot air balloon and a cannon, it gets into the realm of, well, maybe I as the DM wouldn't totally mind, but I feel like there might be other players who could be like, oh, well, having something like that in the world makes this less enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The thing I've always been interested is watching the different like DMs in our groups, because at this point, like, enough of us have, those of us who've kind of established ourselves have set up what we do and what we're good at, if you want to call it that, because we all have our basic tool set, and we would like to think that we know the rules. There is one of us in the group that knows the rules better. He has my younger brother Travis has like this almost encyclopedic knowledge when it comes to the rules of 5th edition, and he will adhere to them when he runs the game to the best of his abilities. But even then, like, there's things the rules don't call for, or there's a moment where he's like, this is stupid, this is a dumb rule. Like the
Is a tank a monk weapon?
Yeah, he's exactly. Well, I mean, he wrote the rules for that. That's the thing. But like each one of us has like our specialty, and like I've noticed for you go hard on the world building, and you seem to be able to just like pluck stuff out and throw it into the world like it's something that you've been like it's like you've lived in the world. Cameron is very good at just creating. He's so good at going off of the rails and really just not like it relies a little bit on your ability to yes and, but in a really good way where
it's so fun.
He presents it and like your knee-jerk reaction is like, yeah, this is how it is.
Yep.
It's fascinating.
He's like, yeah, there's just like it's fantasy, but there's like a high-speed maglev train. You're like, cool.
Well, it's Final Fantasy is what it is. It's Final Fantasy. I kind of think of his world as like Final Fantasy 15 or 7, which is weird because like he and I were talking, and I'm gonna actually go on a big tangent about this, about the Final Fantasy 7 remake, but he and I both have never actually played the original Final Fantasy 7, but he is much more like 7 adjacent than I am, because I think he watched Crisis Core, or no, he played Crisis Core and has watched Advent Children. For those who are uninitiated, Crisis Core was the prequel that they released on the PSP, I believe, and it's the sequel that talks about the character of Zack. I think Zack Fair is his name, and like he's referenced a little bit in even the remake right now, and like, by all accounts, as I understand it, like there's Cloud, who they've made to be pretty cool in the remake, and then there's Zack, who's like actually cool. Like Cloud, I think the best way to describe it is Cloud is the neighborhood kid who knows how to do a kickflip. Zack is Tony Hawk. That is as I understand it. Like, this is the way it's been explained, and like, I guess Advent Children was the like sequel story, but like I always joke that was before Nomura understood how storytelling worked, because like, spoiler, at the end of Final Fantasy VII, guess what? Sephiroth is the final boss. He becomes the anime god of life and death. You fight him, you win. That's not a spoiler, because that's how almost every single Final Fantasy game is. You find an antagonist, he turns into something ridiculous, like he's part cloud, part angel, half man, like he's this fucking Cirrus centaur, and you fight him. Like, it's just the way all, like, I think 6 did it, I'm pretty sure 4 did it, I have no idea what 5 did. It happened in 15, I think it happens in 10, and I don't remember what happens in 12, because that's one of the many ones that I didn't finish. So far, the only Final Fantasy games I've ever finished is the Part 1 remake for Final Fantasy 7 and 15, because I love those dreamy anime boys too much. But to dial back, like, now that I've played that game enough, like, I have this sense of like where the world of Everfall kind of sits, in terms of like its combination of magic and technology and all that kind of stuff. It makes it really fascinating. But to have that, you need to have that conversation with your players of, are we okay with this? Is this something that we want? If you have that conversation early on, that's kind of the important thing, so you don't have that moment of a player being like, well, you know that 1980s film that Schwarzenegger was in, Predator, that's the one. Yeah, I want to be that guy, the hunter. And you have that moment of like, is it just like a character inspired from it? Because I can work with that. They're like, no, with like the Predator vision and the shoulder cannon and all that. I want that. How the hell do you even incorporate, like, you're trying to play your high fantasy game, like your World of Warcraft with the serial numbers filed off, and somebody wants to show up as like, you know, dreadlocks, 7 feet tall, the arm blade, and the like, there's no, you have to sit down and have that conversation. It's like, look, I know what you love and what you want to play, but no.
This is some big talk coming from Iron Man, the gunslinging priest.
Shut up. You.
Oh, sorry, vampire priest.
Hey, half.
half vampire.
Constantine was like, as adult Nathan was so embarrassed to have that character be a thing, because it was like, that is everything that like teen angst 14-year-old Nathan would have been like. Yeah, he's gunslinger, but he also believes in the gods, but they're the old gods, and he's got like these guns and stuff, and he's all Slavic and edgy, and he's a half vampire, but he fights for good, but he struggles with this inner duality of good and evil. And like, 14-year-old Nathan's going crazy, just like, this is everything that a character should be. He's perfect. He's the best character ever. And grown ass Nathan, adult Nathan is like, why are you still like this?
I think it's so funny. I really would have loved, like, this is one of the many moments I've wished that our D&D games had been recorded. I would have really loved to see a side-by-side juxtaposition of, because for those who don't know, when we were playing this game, all of us as a group, there were like 8 of us in the party or something, and it finally became apparent to Cameron. I don't know if he made this decision because, well, I don't remember if he made this decision because of the nature of how the characters were turning out, or because he just felt that it would be better for the nature of the game. But he decided he wanted to split the party in 2 and run the 2 groups separately. They would still be working towards the same goal, just from different angles, which is why I think your group ended up fighting the actual final boss, whereas our group's job was basically like kill all of the little minions, or big minions at that point, which was fine. But I really would have loved to see a juxtaposition of that, because on the one hand, with your guys' party, we had, Constantine, the half vampire Iron Man gunslinging priest. It's like, amalgamation of 7 different kinds of edgelord. Then we had Gazlan, who is fantastic. I love Gazlan. Had the pleasure of getting to play with Macy's character Gazlan in the game that is a prequel to the game we're going to be doing next. And then who else was in that?
So Gazlan actually wasn't a part of that, because that was her and Mulgrim went off, and we just kind of just trolled around.
Oh, that was your own thing.
Yeah, no, it was my gunslinger Constantine. It was her human paladin Ariel, who had her story about like her family had been taken from her and everything. And then you had Schwoof, and I
love Schwoof.
I cannot remember what was his actual, because like
Lucius
was his actual name, but he was a Kenku monk. Who eventually regained his ability to speak or whatever. But it was just like, we had our party was so serious, and like it was something that we all sort of agreed on, that like these are the straight-faced characters, like this is the HBO miniseries characters.
Oh,
and
man.
Then hard cut to Comedy Central.
We were, I think the best way to describe our group is, that's why I posted in the group chat long after we didn't finish playing. I found a recording of the Benny Hill theme played on the mandolin, and I think that is the best description of our half of the group that is possible, because we had my character, the bard, and then we had Camden's character. It was like
Bard.
He played 2 characters. Well, he had at first he had like the weird Angel of Death character, and then he did before that he was after that he was Tiberius, and then I'm blanking. Oh, and then of course, who could forget Officer Vice, the one and only member of the Fashion Police. And we're just going around being absolutely insane. The reason I say I would have loved to have seen a jump cut is the tonal juxtaposition would be so great to see between those just vastly different game tones. Because on the one hand, we had our group who was doing things like sneaking into places by my character pretending that Camden's character was his servant Igor, and spinning this web of lies about how we were invited, but it was just like not serious at all. And then on the other hand, we have Team Serious over here doing things like dealing with the complex nature of grief and the dichotomy of good and evil.
Yeah, no, it was just like some of the most ridiculous stuff.
And the final confrontation with our group involved my character in his magical sun chariot with Camden's character standing behind him. Both of us were wearing sunglasses at the time. And his giant mecha robot standing behind him. And us just raining destruction upon the enemies.
Of course you had a robot. That totally makes sense. Oh
Mecha Kavar was its name.
Of course. Had to let that one sink in. Oh boy. Man, I miss that game every now and again. The emotional turmoil that it threw me through on the regular was a lot, but it was the first moment where between your game and the one that the end of Everfall 1, where like we kind of settled into like, okay, we're actually building like somewhat serious emotional narratives every now and again. Macy's game, her Amnesia campaign, has been just about every kind of emotional trauma that a person can deal with. And I know that's not what she intended, but it's kind of what it became. Because, like, guess whose character has arguably the saddest one of the saddest backstories?
Oh, I got one wild guess.
Here's the crazy thing about that is none of us picked those backstories. She just wrote them and went with it.
Right.
And, like, I think of the characters, mine and Amelia's characters are probably like the most depressing ones, where like the character of Avitus, like he had this perfect idyllic family. He was married and everything. He was about to have 2 twin sons, and then both the wife and children die in childbirth, and he does not deal with it very well. He is part of the reason why we have a problem. And then you have Amelia's character, who she was a monk at the Sun Temple or whatever, and then somebody came and murdered basically everybody. Like, that's some depressing stuff.
Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
You have no idea. You make that joke, but you're closer.
No, I believe it.
You're closer than you would think. But between that and then like some of the real shit that's going on in the Everfall 2 game, and that is really more of our construction. It's been fascinating to see all of this kind of stuff pan out in these games. We're starting to see some emotional. Well, I don't even want to know that I call it emotional things happen, because like I wouldn't call it. There's not necessarily none of the characters that we have in your campaign have any like excess emotional baggage. There's drama, absolutely, but not in the same like destructive, depressing way that like some of these other characters have. Plus, we have Bobby.
Bobby is single-handedly responsible for lightening the tone of my campaign by at least like 2 notches.
I would say 4. I kick the door open, and then I hide.
I actually hurt myself. Like, I am still sore because I laughed so hard when he did that. The sheer disbelief, the perfect timing of the delivery. If Travis ever became a stand-up comedian, he would be tremendously successful. It was, God. I love that sometimes I know exactly what Bobby's going to do, and sometimes he just comes way out of left field.
Well, the funny thing is like when it comes to Travis, the smarter the character he plays, the easier it is to predict them to a cap. Because like Gabriel, you could sort of plan for. You kind of had an idea of what he was gonna do. It was maybe not necessarily in the way you thought he was gonna go about it, but aside from the Wendy's bit, like it was very. You could generally know what he was going to do in any given scenario, and you could deal with it. But when it comes to Bobby, there is no planning that you can do that will ever really prepare yourself, because you have what is essentially a child running rampant. But the difference is, with a child, you can just grab their arm and eventually they can just throw a tantrum, but they'll tire themselves out. Like, you can restrain a 4-year-old.
Bobby doesn't tire himself out. He's in excellent cardiovascular condition.
Exactly. Bobby won't tire himself out. You can't hold him down or restrain him. He's just gonna go, dude. Like, it's hysterical.
So good.
And now what?
I
Like,
think
we're trying to defend this city. Bobby is just trying to. I appreciate that Travis is like, I gotta figure out how Bobby's gonna be helpful, but like, how is Bobby gonna be helpful? And I'm now apparently a general. I don't know.
I mean, that's what happens. Like it or not, whether or not you give your characters charisma in the game, you play them with charisma.
That's true. That's true. Like, Callan so I'm playing this in Brendan's campaign. I'm playing a half-orc champion fighter, which is about as milquetoast as a fighter as you get, unless he was a human fighter. That's the only way you bring it up to, like, the only way I could make it more boring and turn it into that just, like, Wonder Bread with, like, Craft American singles I just went human. And not only not human, Player's Handbook standard human, not the variant. That is the only way I could have made this more uninteresting and blasé. But I went for the power gaming route of playing a half-orc. 10 charisma. That's it. And I think the way that we're ruling a lot of that isn't necessarily, like, Callan is probably good looking in his own right, in so much that, like, some people find the Hopthor Bjornsson physique, rightly so, kind of attractive, because maybe you want the guy who could rescue you from pretty much anything.
At this point,
I mean, he can stand in the way of most creatures and stop them. He's 400 pounds. He can do what he wants.
It's true.
But he's a half-orc in a world that's maybe a little bit racist against them, so everybody's just like, I don't know what to think about you.
I think that a lot of what, in the narrative sense, I think that a lot of what impedes Callan in terms of his charismatic interaction is just the fact that he's such a contradiction in so many ways to a lot of people. He challenges a lot of preconceptions that a lot of the people in the world have, because he's a big hulking half-orc, and people go, okay, I know what to expect. But then he's a huge hulking half-orc with really expensive, fine, magical armor, and who is pretty articulate. I would argue one of the most articulate characters in the party. And who's honestly, I'm not sure if you think of it this way, Nathan, but he's fairly level-headed. And so people don't know how to react. But I think the difference in the encounter we just had, where you were taking command of that squad of troops who were without a leader, is Callan. I think that the place where Callan exudes the most confidence is when he's in that battlefield scenario. He had so much experience coming into the game, and then just the number of experiences that he has had fighting all this batshit crazy stuff that I've thrown at you guys over the course of the last few months. He has that confidence, and he knows how to command.
I have always enjoyed, and I don't get to do it very often, because in a lot of the games we have played, you have to find a way to incorporate magic into your kit at some point. Otherwise, barring specific moments, you have to incorporate some kind of casting or magical elements beyond just like a better weapon or better armor to keep pace with what's going on. It's one of the things I realized when in Cameron's game where, like, if I'm going to keep pace, like, I gotta have some, like, ridiculous shit. But it was, that's the expectation that he put forward. But I've always enjoyed playing that character. And again, I don't get it. And this is one of the moments I've gotten to do it where he can't cast spells. I've thought about picking up Magic Initiate, but like I think that goes counter to what he is. He did like there's no real active effects with the equipment that he carries. We haven't had a chance to explore the Mage Hunter's Mantle, and we may never because like mages aren't a huge foe that we will encounter. But if it does happen, it'll be awesome.
Well, and I mean, and you knew that going into designing that item because, well, I guess at that time you weren't sure if you guys would end up being hunted because of the nature of Pyramus' whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's still a strong item.
Oh yeah, it's super cool. But like the axe, it has an effect that you can work with and stuff like that, but it's not like, you know, it casts fireball or it makes you immune to it deals a little more damage and lets you just kind of be a more intimidating fighter in some cases. But I like the idea that like he doesn't cast spells. He's not, you know, particularly educated when it comes to magic. He's just tougher than everybody. So I want to have that moment where you have what like we like encounter a rogue wizard or something like that, or even if we get to the point where we deal with Sigurd and everybody's like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. I like the idea of Callan just beating him to death. and not like it's just one of those things where it doesn't matter what weird void spells he has or what his patron does. It's just Callan just powers through the use of his tired dad energy. And just uses his pure frustration. And I think that's the thing I've also thought about classing in a barbarian, but like that again kind of goes counter to who he is, where like it's not that barbarian rage. It's just the very calculating, seething frustration that he just exudes in every scenario. And I think he, to an extent, he's also exuded this with every social interaction, both with NPCs in the world, and it may not be like directed at them as like, I am frustrated and seething at you, but just like it's part of his aura. And sometimes it is directed at a person, rare though that may be. And he has to tailor it, because with Pyramus, it can maybe be a little more directed. With Xavier, it can just be all up. With Bobby, it is very much the tired, frustrated dad, but you can't be mad at the kid because he doesn't know what he's doing.
Bobby's getting such an interesting upbringing.
Yeah, Bobby and his 3 dads.
It's 3 dads and the family dog. Don't forget the family dog.
To this day, that's one of the funniest things he said. You got a weird dog, Mr. Paramus. Oh my gosh.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's great. I think it's interesting. Callan is in many ways the everyman in the group. Not in the sense that he's normal, because he isn't. Like, he has exceptional ability in terms of his combat, in terms of his strategic expertise, in terms of his toughness, and his ability to function in combat with confidence and effectiveness. And he does have a little bit more exposure to weird shit. This is what I think is funny about Callan. Callan has more exposure to weird shit than most of the population of my world, because he has lived on the fringes. He's worked with the Frozen Legion beyond the mountains in the Uncharted Lands with all the shitty, weird monster shit that goes on up there. So he comes down south thinking, all right, this is going to be, you know, I got to guard this weird wizard guy. Fine, getting well paid. And somehow the guy who generally would be the weirdest one in, or at least the one most experienced with weirdness in any encounter with normal people, somehow ended up the least weird one in the group. And I think it's funny because I think Callan is the one, and you've done a great job of doing this. Callan is the one who consistently is able to portray that, like, what the fuck?
Like, what is going on? Why is this happening? what it's and that's part of his character is just like he part of the reason why he left the Frozen Legion, like some of it is just because it just didn't feel like the place for him anymore. But part of it is just like I need like I'm totally like it's one of those where I'm totally capable of doing these things. I'll probably be able to do it for another 20 years, but like I don't know. I don't want to take it easy for a little bit, you know? Just I'm gonna go down south and go like I'm gonna punch rogues and like suplex bandits because I'm huge. Who's gonna stop me? And then what? 2 months later, he has to fight a Hydra by himself because we encountered this weird antlered god or whatever, and he just makes everybody crazy except him because he just is so frustrated.
I know.
Or he's just
I think that Callan being the only one to succeed on that wisdom saving throw was I couldn't have scripted it better.
It makes total narrative sense. Like even with Xavier to a certain extent, it makes sense that he didn't make that save with everything that was going on with him. But
yeah,
it just it could not have been more perfect in that entire scenario. And then the fact that he gets back to town and he just has the Hydra corpse with him because he's like, I got it, maybe they'll have a use for it or something like that. Not as a trophy, not for bragging rights. He's just like, they gotta know that this is a problem, I guess, and
I know
it'll fit, and maybe it'll feed somebody. And the Hydra steaks are good or whatever. And everybody's just like, oh my god.
Yeah, I would really love to see, and this is maybe segueing a little bit into a different topic. I'd love to see. It wouldn't work well as a D&D campaign, but it could be an interesting novel or TV series. The perspective of the everyday person who has to, who spent their whole life working as like a cobbler, and then this fucking dude shows up with this Hydra on his cart. Like, and I think this is something to think about because as D&D players and DMs, we're so used to this idea of like, well, obviously shit's gonna hit the fan because otherwise there wouldn't be a game. But I think it's so funny sometimes to think about the perspective of the world because, like you say, I definitely make a conscious choice to invest most in world building out of all the things that I could, focus on as a DM. And it's so funny to me to think about, like, you guys met in the beginning. I think Sigurd interacted with, there's just like this guy who's like, yeah, I'm a crossbow merchant. And you had a few conversations with him and he was just a normal guy. I think about that guy sometimes. I'm like, what has happened in his life in the last 3 months? Like, he's like, yeah, we're gonna go to the Olympics. It's gonna be great. We're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be a family outing. And then it's just like there was a mass serial killing, a sign of the apocalypse, and now there's fucking like half the town's been destroyed. There's been a huge like semi-war.
Continue with that. I actually got to take a phone call.
Yeah. It's actually kind of funny. I set up this whole war plot in my game for them, and this is similar to something happened in actually the last game I ran for a party of mostly the same people. He just didn't answer.
No, it was just like hung up. It's like, okay, weird.
I did want to bring attention to the fact that this has happened twice in my campaigns, where I've been like, oh, I'm going to set up this big conflict or big twist. It's going to be great. It's going to change the political outlook of the world. It's going to be super cool. And both times, you guys have been like, hey, what's that thing? And I've been like, nothing. You guys have been like, well, we're going to look into that. And then you change the course of the story. Like, for example, in this game, the war that I was like, okay, we're going to have a war. We're building up all these tensions. Things are building. And it's like, finally, war is declared. Things are going to start out. And then I think we had like one session where the war was happening. And then you guys were like, but what if we just took their invasion fleet and pushed it somewhere else.
Yeah, what if we just took their invasion fleet and put it at the bottom of the ocean?
By the way, and I know I said this in the session, but like if we return to this world in future, that's gonna be super haunted. Because I think it was.
Don't
'cause we
worry,
have
we'll shit
Alec-
all over it.
Yeah, basically, you can go there and kill them all again. But Alec, because Alec's keeping track of the in our game, one of the players keeps track of the date, the world date, and it happened to be on New Year's Eve that they sank this entire invasion fleet, and killed like thousands of people.
Well, and
So, like,
as
it's
I
gonna be-
remember it, the reason why we went on that track is everybody's like, okay, I guess we're gonna go with them, and I said, stop losing sight of what your goal is here. Like,
Yeah, because I tried to send you guys somewhere else.
yeah, and I feel it was like a converse. It was one of these running things that we kept having where like Pyramus would have like whatever the dream connection, whatever, and try to like think on it, and Callan just tells me like, you need to stop thinking and start acting. There is no more time for pondering. Like, you need to act now. And even in the moment where like, okay, we'll get everything put together, we'll send you guys there, and like I think Callan was one was like, we have other like, how like
We're busy.
Yeah, we're doing like we were gonna go. Tell you what, we'll go pick up milk on the way, but like we got our own stuff to do out in the same area. We're gonna go deal with that. You take your entire fleet and go do whatever the thing that you're gonna do. But like we're not your soldiers. We're gonna do what we want. And it turns out what we did is end the war, rescue what was essentially the president, and his like personal aide and a couple other like,
and the admiral.
Yeah, like Callan. There are definite moments where like I know that Callan is just kind of sitting and twiddling his thumbs waiting for the next fight, because that's what he's built for. It's what he was paid to do. But there are definite moments where like I feel like I need to step in and be like, guys, focus. Brennan is trying to deceive you. He is actively trying to get you to go away from this so he can make it more difficult later. Stop getting distracted. We can get him now.
I know, like, if you guys had left, if you had gone where I was trying to push you, and I like to think, and you know, the other players can always correct me on this if they don't find it to be the case, but I like to think that I do a pretty good job of presenting social and environmental pressures in the context of the narrative, while still making it very clear, like, you guys can just ignore this. Just the governor doesn't think you can, because they think they're hot shit, because they're the governor. But like, you can tell them to go fuck themselves. There's just going to be consequences. You know, so I'm like, if you guys had just gone where they wanted you to, because I'll just tell you this, because it's not a spoiler at this point. My original plan was that you guys would go with them to that port city, and then that port city was the first one that was attacked. That's why it went dark. And so you were going to be there, and then you were going to get attacked by all these weird forest creatures, and that was how we were going to move in to the whole Antlered Man, like, third act. But you guys didn't do that. Oh, and then, by the way, to make things more difficult for you, the essentially president guy, and Sariel, Pyramus's wizard girlfriend, they were just going to die out there, and then the enemy fleet would have the plan would have worked. They would have marched straight to the capital, and Delmarev would now control the Republic, which would have made shit a lot harder for you guys. But you guys were like, but what if we don't do that?
Yeah, what if we keep doing what we intended to do? Like, what if we just stayed focused?
And like I was going to say earlier, a similar thing happened in the last campaign I ran for these guys. I had this whole plot. I was like, okay, there's this like aging emperor, and he has this young son, the prince, and the prince is like really invested in this peace effort because there's a major war that was happening when the campaign started. And I was like, okay, they're making headway with the peace, but the big bad evil guy doesn't want there to be peace because the war is distracting everyone from his evil plan. So he's gonna have the prince killed, and then the emperor is going to go berserk. He's going to have the prince killed and pin it on the other empire, and then the emperor is going to go berserk, and the war is going to go on forever. But then your character, you were just like, yeah, I just want to like.
You presented the fixation of his revenge as like there, and he's like, the power of revenge was stronger.
Yeah, and you just like figured it out. There were so many points at which your guys finding out exactly what was going on and stopping the enemies from finding out that you knew what was going on. There were so many points in the chain where that could have fallen apart.
Because as I remember, Aldaris went and just like hung out at bars for a little while just because he was like sullen and whatever. But he's like, wait a second, this is actually going to be kind of interesting. Like, it was one of the few times where I've actually been like, I'm going to participate in this intrigue plot instead of just waiting for initiative to be rolled. And then like, not only made it so it made it seem like I was on their side, but then anybody who could have like spilled the beans, I killed in a back alley.
I know. You did. Oh,
yeah,
God,
I
so
remember
good.
that because I ganked that dude right after the bar scene.
I think that bar scene may be one of my favorite moments of roleplay in any game I've ever run, because it was the perfect combination of great roleplay and good dice rolls, allowing you to bullshit your way through that situation in a pretty brilliant way, and you basically just brute forced over their doubt. And then you killed them, so they couldn't tell anyone.
Yeah, I don't play super high charisma characters that often anymore, just because like I'm not playing those classes. It'd be one thing if I was playing a paladin or a warlock. That's one thing, but like I enjoy playing. As much as I joke about like the champion fighter being like the most like blasé, uninteresting way to engage in 5th edition's combat, it's also the one that I enjoy the most. That and the barbarian, I've had the most fun in terms of combat, because it's getting into melee combat and like in theory being able to disrupt what's going on, and then having the bad guy misty step, so I just end up running laps in between a fight. Cameron, I've not forgotten that. I will find a way to punish you for that crap.
I felt so bad on Saturday or Sunday for Bobby when he was running out through the fucking snowfield, and the archer dude just kept teleporting away.
It's
from
weird that they have that feature constantly up all the time. That's the thing that I kind of eyed that with like an air of suspicion. We're like, that's a lot of mobility for a CR2 creature.
Well, they're not CR2.
Oh, well, whatever CR they are, it's a lot of mobility.
They have spell slots. They were using them.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. I was not aware of that. So they
would have run out eventually. I don't think any one of them did it more than like twice.
The thing that I'm not concerned about, but maybe a little like all right, like Callan is probably gonna have to step in and be like, okay, focus, remember what our goal is. Like, we'll hang out and help protect the city as we need to, but I remember like our main goal is getting Secret. Like, that's the goal. And if we can scry him and find a way to get to him, like, I know that Callan is going to be like, all right, cool, let's go now. And everybody will be like, well, wait, we need to prepare. It's like, we're prepared now. He's only going to get tougher. Let's get there now while he's still within alligator range.
Yeah. That's something you guys would understand, is time's not on your side.
That even the moment where like after we got back from the when we finally pulled Paramus out of that like weird other space, or when it got jutted out, like the thought was, okay, we're gonna sit and we're gonna think about this. I'm like, why are like, I understand and it's very much to the character's point, where the character is Pyramus is very contemplative, he's very academic. He is a man who does not go into a scenario without thinking about it, and that's to play that character that well is huge. It's one of the reasons why I love playing with Alec, is that he even if it's not at a conscious level, he totally gets that. And it creates a very good dichotomy between, you know, first of all, Callan is technically Pyramus's bodyguard, although he has had a couple moments where he's like, you know, I could just leave him pissing in the wind. They've been few and far between, but Callan has had a couple of moments of internal frustration. Not enough to like leave him be, but just like, oh my god, I can't believe I got hired for this. He got hired by Sariel, the wizard girlfriend, to like, hey, watch out for him. Just make sure he doesn't like, die. And
make sure he doesn't do something stupid like resurrect a dragon.
And then he goes and resurrects a dragon, and then insert surprise Pikachu meme. But we have had these really great moments of, I'm gonna be contemplative, and Callan being like, "Fuck you think? We're going.
Yeah,
we're going to McDonald's now. We're not waiting. Like we don't know how long they're gonna have the McRib. We gotta go now. We can't think about it.
We can't, Nathan. We can't say McDonald's here. There's only one. There's only one burger
You're
chain.
right. There's Wendy's, and that's it.
There's only one burger chain we're allowed to mention, or Travis will come and get us.
Wendy's, if you're listening, you can sponsor this podcast, and I will talk about how much I love your fresh, never frozen beef. Real talk. I'm gonna go on a stupid tangent here. I unironically enjoy Wendy's. Like, it's an actual, like, don't
Wendy's?
get me wrong. I have I have a very high expectation of food, and I like to think of myself as actually a pretty capable cook. Shout out to Andrew Ray of Binging with Babish. He's the reason why I got into cooking. Whenever you're able to make it down here, I gotta make burgers for you, because that will like seal the deal. I make smash burgers pretty goddamn well, but like my expectation for food and specifically the expectation of the food I make is very high, but my actual like tolerance for food is very low. We're like. And I've talked about this in many scenarios. I'm glad this is finally being recorded. When it comes to food, I have this very golden retriever-esque outlook on it, where after the fact, like if I'm thinking about, we have this really great place here in Vancouver, in downtown Vancouver, Warehouse 23. Some of my favorite food I've ever had has been from that place. One of the things they have is this honey cornbread that they have with slab cut bacon, which is like a thick slab of bacon, and then just kind of like roughly cubed up. It is like. There's so many other things they have there that are fantastic, but I always highlight that because it's such like a little mundane thing where it's cornbread and bacon. Who cares? They have like this honey butter that goes along with it. I think it's got a little bit of maple in it to go along with it. Like, it is absolutely fantastic. I have the same reaction eating that in the moment that I do eating a KFC biscuit. After the fact, a day later, or even hours later, an hour, 20 minutes later, whatever you want to call it, I can have that critical thought process of saying X is better than Y. I like, or maybe a better example is like, we have a Killer Burger here in Hazeldale that I unabashedly love. Killer Burger is one of my favorite places. Their like classic burger is always going to be head and shoulder above a McDonald's McDouble. Mm-hmm. And given the choice, I will typically choose Killer Burger almost all the time. But I have a weird obsession when it comes to crappy fast food, so I'll pretty much eat anything, and I will happily consume that McDouble. And
I recall our many midnight runs to Taco Bell.
Yep. Oh yeah, love me some Taco Bell. Can't eat it right now. We're on a diet. We're mostly just cutting calories, but it's working. But I can think critically about it. I can analyze that after the fact and say, just based on the way it was cooked and the quality of the beef and the bun is better and all the veggies are fresh, like I can have that critical response. But in that moment where I am consuming it, they are the exact same thing to me. They're both equally fantastic, and I cannot be convinced otherwise. And 5 minutes later, I'm sitting there thinking, that wasn't so great. It happens to me most with, actually more than anything else, it happens to me with Chinese food here in this area. We don't have very many good Chinese food places here. We only just recently found a couple good ones. There's one off of Main Street, and there's one over in that shopping center off of Patton 205, where like those are actually pretty good. But I've also been to Panda Express a lot. And again, after the fact, I know Taste of China, 1,000 times better. No argument. In the moment, they're the same thing. I cannot tell the difference.
Yeah. I'll be right back. I actually run to the bathroom really quick.
Go
here.
for it.
We'll cut this out in post, except in the VOD, which
Yeah,
whatever.
I'm leaving everything in. Everybody needs to know that, like, here's the thing when it comes to starting your whole adventure in this, it's not gonna come out like the Rooster Teeth podcast or Dude Soup or Tox Machina or everything. You got to start somewhere, and I think some of it is leaving in these little bits, knowing that sometimes you have to talk into the void. And know that maybe nobody's listening, maybe nobody knows, maybe this is just a simulation, and if it is, we have some complaints about the most recent patch update. Actually, there's been some bugs and some issues that we're running into. I don't know if the system admin is listening to this right now, if they're seeing these, but so the chewing exe that we have running in the system is a little flawed. Because we still have users that are biting their own cheek and their own tongue, which, at certain levels kind of makes sense. But the fact that it's left in as the level progression happens is a little embarrassing. The fact that we're drawn to food that isn't good for us is, I think that needs to be fixed in the next patch update. I have some general issues with the simulation. But, it is what it is. I keep using the simulation analogy because sometimes I just can't believe that we're living in this, like, really goofed up reality. Man. So, I'd say how about them sports, but we ain't got sports right now. It ain't happening. There's no sports happening. And it makes me laugh. I'm not a sports fan, particularly, but I appreciate it. The only reason I understand football is because I had a roommate who made me sit down and play Madden for an afternoon. That's why I understand how to play football. Let's deal with that.
Talking about sports now?
The fact that we don't have any, and that's my only contribution. But yeah, it's to kind of dial back, just like we have such a good group dynamic for this party. It really is like the perfect amalgamation of like the super weird like Target brand version of Geralt of Rivia. You have,
I think that's how he would describe him.
Yeah, I think that's the way he went with it. It's just like a low rent Geralt. You have that. You have Professor Wanna Bacon Dragon, but maybe not. Who's super smart and super charismatic and maybe misses out on most social cues. You have stupid Shazam.
Stupid Shazam.
Yeah, you have like I wouldn't even call him GED Shazam because I know he wouldn't pass. You have window licker Shazam, and then you have the big tired dad friend. That is the group. Like, you could explain it as the sorcerer, the blood hunter, the strength-based rogue, and the champion fighter, and that gives you an idea of the mechanics of how they operate, but it doesn't tell you who they are.
Nope. No, it doesn't. Oh, don't forget Geralt is now also the evangelist.
Right, he's now like Anubis or whatever. he's this weird like televangelist werewolf.
Televangelist werewolf.
I just and I think the crazy thing is for all of that is that it makes sense in the narrative. It all tracks. So. And you're
I-
sitting here like, how did I let this happen?
I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I sat down to prep for the last session. I just had a moment of just like, what the fuck do I do?
Yeah.
Because I had the broad strokes planned since like August, but it's just gone so off the rails in a very good way. But I'm just sitting there. I'm just like, what the hell? What has happened?
Because
What have I allowed to happen?
there was a moment where like we were just quite literally off, just goofing off in the northern reaches.
You're like, let's go kill this thing and get money. And then you were like, okay, well, let's just, you know, we need a premises for Wendy's. So let's pursue that for a little while.
Yeah. And then eventually you're like, okay, we need to get back to the plot. And I'm going to use I mean, again, in the moment, totally made sense. But as I think about it in retrospect, I'm like, that's a pretty old trick in the book to be using the dream spell to get it to
I know.
go. But at the time, like, even in the moment, I was just like, I mean, all right, that's fine. Like, it makes sense. There's no other way that we can move the plot along in a way that is going to be organic. And at least it's not like, it would have been one thing if you had like Xavier or even Callan to have that dream, because then Callan would have been like, why?
Mm-hmm.
That would have been the moment where he would finally delay.
Yeah. You know, one of these days I'll run. I think the only way to stop my campaigns from turning into something like this, and again, I love my campaign. It's super fun, and it's been a blast. But I think the only way for me to stick to doing a low magic narrative is just to have no magic.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people would be interested in that. That's a subject for another day. But I feel like we could do some interesting stuff there, but at the same time, there's a part of me that thinks that might not be what 5th edition is good at. Because what do you have left? You've got 2 of the kinds of fighter, two of the kinds of rogue, and like
Half a monk.
one of the kinds of monk.
The barbarian.
Kind of. The barbarian works too. I guess you can make a party with that, but so much of 5th edition is built around having magic options. And I tried the like only you guys are magic in that Underdark campaign I ran for a hot 3 sessions. But I don't know. I feel like the concept has something behind it, but the thing that bugged me the most about that Underdark game was I got to the point within 1 session that I usually get to after like 6 months, which is like they have so much institutional power at their backs. I can't justify why they should be doing all this stuff by themselves. Because I don't know if you remember, but like I felt like the campaign actually went really well as a narrative. Like I think that, for example, I was always very proud of the first session. I managed to get like 7 of you guys together in what I thought was a pretty organic way.
For the most part, yeah, it definitely came together. It made sense.
But then we got to the point like 3 sessions in where it was like, this problem that you guys are trying to solve, there's no reason why the institutions that you're all a part of would not supply you with resources and manpower on the order of like dozens and dozens of personnel. And at that point, it's just like, that's not what 5th edition is for.
Not in that moment, no.
So I was just like, shit, what do I do? So, well, you know what I did. I just said,
yeah, you're just like, yeah, heck this.
It's over. We're doing something else.
We need another session with a guest character. I enjoyed having Shazi on. Having
fun.
Having like Macy or Cameron or something like that come on.
I mean, that'd be great. I'd love to have them. I wanted them in the player list from the beginning, but
they just didn't have the time to commit to it.
Yeah. But Cameron or Macy, if you're listening, love to have you guys in a guest session. or 2. Shazi's ended up being 2 sessions, I think.
Yeah.
And because you guys just goofed off so much, it was just like
There was the problem is it was the same session you introduced Bobby.
yeah,
That was the
that
same
was the
session he
problem.
showed up.
The same session that he showed up, same session that we had that slugfest, which made me reevaluate my own rules.
Well,
There's a lot going on.
I had voiced my concern about that to tell you, like, this may be an issue. Just in terms of the way the game runs. Like, this may be something that we need to... this may be a problem later.
Right.
Make sure my sync is actually updating. Okay, good. So I want to transition out, just talk about what games you playing right now.
Well, I've been playing a lot of Star Wars Battlefront 2, the new one. The control system, particularly for the heroes versus villains combat, I actually think is really, really nice. Really flows well. It's very fun. It's to the point where one of the things you can do in the game is you can, when you're playing as a hero, you can hit Alt and a directional key to just like quickly strafe, and you do it all the time. And I find myself doing it in every game now, and it just doesn't do anything. And I'm like, shit. I've even done it while I was actively talking about it. Like I was telling someone about it, and then I still did it while I was talking. I was like, you're joking. I've been playing that. I've been playing Minecraft actually, a fair amount recently.
Yeah, I saw you posted the new server in the Discord.
Oh, it's the same server. It's just the
Updated
new
IP.
address.
Okay.
Reminds me, I gotta boot that up. Not that anyone's been playing.
Yeah, run your demon chicken generator.
It only runs if there's someone near it. It requires soul energy, Nathan.
There it is.
What
how's
about you?
your
What games
your
you-
Witcher
well,
playthrough going?
Oh, well, unfortunately, like I said, the first recording session, luckily I always record my voice audio separately. Ever since the first video I did, I realized recording it together doesn't work very well, so I recorded it separately. So we got the voice audio, but I'm not sure if I'm going to release it because there's no Witcher audio. It goofed because I had never done this before, but I was trying to set it up such that Olivia and I could both have headsets, and it worked. However, it screwed up the audio capture for the game sound. So it got my microphone capture because all that the computer had to worry about was, okay, listen to the mic and put that in Audacity. That's fine. But the Witcher thing, OBS was trying to listen to an output, but OBS was trying to listen to the wrong output. So even though we were hearing it, OBS wasn't hearing it. And because I was a dum-dum and I didn't test, that went through. So I'm not sure if I'm going to release it. I might. We'll see.
I just
What we
release
might
it
do
with the
is start
preface of just say like, so learning experience. Nothing wrong.
Well,
with
we
that.
only played for like an hour, so we might just start over. Like we didn't do much at all. We fought the wraith at the well, and that's pretty much all that we did.
Oh yeah, that's not a whole lot.
No, we didn't do very much. So we spent a lot of time playing Gwent. So
I hate that game. I'm so well. I mean, part of it is I'm really bad at Gwent. I'm bad at most card games that are in a game. To be fair.
Oh gosh.
What am I playing?
But yeah, I think that's what we'll do is we'll start it over, and I'll do some testing, and then we'll just do another playthrough with a preface, just like we've seen the first hour of this game, or
Yeah.
the first like 20 minutes of content. Spent a lot of time dicking around. Something that always bothered me. I have to wrap up pretty soon here, but I just wanted to touch really quickly on something that bothers me about a lot of games like The Witcher, like Kingdom Come Deliverance, games that have that. I would call it a pseudo roleplay experience, in that you can make dialogue choices, but they either don't really matter or they only matter in the short term. But I always hate when I end up there's the obligatory scene where it's a bunch of peasants try to kick the shit out of you, and it never changes, and I don't know why I ever expect anything different. But I always get really mad that I can't pull out my sword and kill them. It's like, no, you got to fight these guys with your fists. I'm like, why? Explain to me why. I don't care about these people.
It will.
Well, good.
You're gonna learn. You're gonna learn something. That's the thing about The Witcher 3 is that a lot of your decisions will matter in the long term.
Oh, really? That's great.
Yeah. I lucked out and got the like really good ending. Like probably I think it's the best ending that you can get. And like, of course, because I will cry at the drop of a hat. Like I was in inconsolable happy tears throughout the entirety of the ending. But just like be smart about your decisions and do a bunch of the extra stuff. Like I encourage people.
Oh, I definitely am going to do that. I always do that when I play games like that.
Like part of it's just because like Geralt deserves to be overpowered. Yeah. Like that's who he is. He's supposed to be better than everybody. I'm trying to think what am I playing right now? I'm mostly playing Fire Emblem Three Houses again. Three Houses technically has 4 routes that you can play, 2 of which are fairly identical. There's the Silver Snow route, which is the church route, which this isn't really a spoiler for anybody because it's been plastered all over the internet, but like there's the 3 houses in the game. You have the Black Eagles, the Blue Lions, and the Golden Deer. The Black Eagle class has 2 routes that it goes. There's Silver Snow and Crimson Flower, and these are the without revealing too much, these are the 2 paths that can go off of. They are diametrically opposed. And in fact, Crimson Flower is very different from the rest of the other routes as well. The Blue Lions route is just taking the Blue Lions class and following that, which turns into Azure Moon. And then the Golden Deer route goes Verdant Wind. If anybody is fairly well versed in voice actor Twitter, you'll have heard the name Joe Zaja, who played Claude von Regan, or Khalid, I think is, if you delve into the lore, where Claude is actually from, because he's not from Fodlan proper, he's from Elmira, which is like, I guess the Fire Emblem equivalent of, it's kind of hard to say how they characterize it. It's very much like barbarians and the Visigoths or whatever, compared to like civilized Europe, except they amped it up to 11 and made them brown as well. Whatever. Fire Emblem games are always going to be weird about how they try to handle race relations. They never do it very well, but I will give them credit, they never like stumble out of the race block, but it's always just like weird how they sometimes try to approach it. This has definitely been the game that's done it the best. But for anybody who has like follows any of these people, like Joe Zaja has a pretty he's actually become a pretty big figure on Twitter now. He's been very fun, but it's been fun, interesting playing that game, because this is I have 4 completed playthroughs. I've played every single route, and I tell everybody, if you're gonna buy it and you want to like experience as much of the game as possible, but you don't want to do 4 playthroughs, skip Silver Snow entirely. Don't do Silver Snow. It is a carbon copy of Verdant Wind, but it sucks. And I think the best way to experience the game, I think, is Azure Moon, Verdant Wind, and then Crimson Flower, because it's the Blue Lions is very much like, it's the very standard Fire Emblem route of, you know, but fallen noble, fighting to reclaim everything, but it takes this really interesting twist. The Verdant Wind playthrough is maybe a little more lighthearted and a little more fun. It kind of feels like a victory lap in some ways, and then Crimson Flower is a very different perspective, and one that I actually really appreciated. It's just, the sad thing is it feels like it was written last when they were trying to finish the game. There's just moments where I'm like, this is good, but it could have been better. The other fun thing, and Travis has talked about this because he's played through the Blue Lions route, in every single house and in some of the church staff in the game, like, there are characters that we all love and hate, except in the Blue Lion house. because in the Golden Deer you have that whole staff of characters, and like I unabashedly love Hilda, is the lazy bitch that she is, and I love Lysethia because she turns into, you expect her to become a like glass cannon, but because she gets a spell that can take away, it heals her for half the damage she deals. She's not a glass cannon anymore. She's just this weird tank, and she'll kill everybody. Leonie, she gets a bad rap. She's poorly or the localization wasn't as great. But like her growths are really good, and Claude is fantastic. But like Ignatz and Raphael, their growths aren't great, and their character design is not fantastic. There's Marianne, who I will always put on a pedestal. She's one of my favorite characters in the game, and anybody who disrespects her, I will fight. This is the hill I'm willing to die on. And then you have Lorenz, who nobody likes. Lorenz can go to hell. You have the Black Eagle House, where like Casper is your traditional shonen protagonist. He just wants to fight all the bad guys, and he's a glue eater, so take that for what it's worth. He wants to fight, and he's kind of small, and he's dumber than heck. You have Dorothea, who, when asked the question, who at the monastery do you want to marry? Her answer invariably will be yes. She's a former songstress, like the former diva of the Mittelfranc Opera Company, and you know what? I love her. She's a very interesting character, like just in terms of like the way her character, like all the characters, once you have time to learn who they are and have the supports and all the character interaction, like even the ones that I hate become redeemable, but like even her paired endings with like every other character are fantastic. You have Petra and Ferdinand, who Ferdinand's kind of a dickhead in the beginning, but he's good-hearted, he's got good intentions, and I love Petra to death. Linhardt is a little uninspiring. Hubert can suck carrots, but carrots being dicks. I hate him. The church staff, carrots. Like Shamir and Catherine are my two favorite characters in the game, I think. I will always ship Cathmir. For now and forever, and it's canon. It is what it is. You can't fight me on this. It is just it's a character dynamic that works. Their characters that work. Their backstories are fantastic. It's just everything. Alois is fun, but he's kind of lame. Flane sucks. Seteth is kind of a stick in the mud. Hanneman isn't fantastic. Manuela, go look her up. And some of the other church staff sucks. But in the Blue Lion's house, every single one of those characters is so well written and so well acted. Their motivations make sense. They all have flaws that appeal to us in some way. They're fairly upfront about what has made them flawed. Like, you have the character of Felix, who is he's this just jaded prick throughout most of the game. But the reason is, the noble house that he comes from has tried to idolize these ideas of, I'm totally dominating this podcast. They've idolized this idea of knighthood that his older brother Glenn died for ingloriously. And he is just jaded and angry and frustrated at this idea that, like, I just want to become strong. I don't care about my house duties, whatever. You have the character of Dedu, who his people were responsible for the murder of the king of Fargus, where all these people are from. And, like, he feels this weird guilt over it, even though he had nothing to do with it. And his people were massacred because of it. But he has this loyalty to Prince Dimitri, because he weirdly feels responsible for it and wants to, like, do this kind of weird Uncle Tom reparation thing for it. But, like, you have conversations with him, and, like, he's a very nurturing, fascinating person. He's a fantastic cook. He strives to get along with everybody, even though he's very, like, standoffish. You have Ingrid, who, like, she was to be wed to Felix's older brother, and then he died. And she's, like, kind of, instead of, like, pushing away from knighthood, she, like, hyper fixates on it. You have, Dimitri himself, who is an entire can of worms in and of himself. You get to see these little moments where, like, the psychosis that he suffers from kind of cracks through the PTSD and survivor's guilt that he has. But as he tries to suppress it, and she's like, no, be normal. And then you have the one of the crowning moments, the kill every last one of them moment in the game. where it's like he's kind of gone feral at that point. And then all the redeeming stuff that happens. You have, Sylvain, who is a womanizer, but you find out that he's a lot more complex than that. You have Mercedes and Annette, who, like, Annette just wants to make her dad, her very absentee father, proud, because he went to go get cigarettes and milk and never came back. You have Mercedes, who, like, has this weird, like, she has this weird motherly interaction with most of the other characters, but, like, mostly just because she's older than most of the other students. Like, everybody in the Blue Lions house is likable, and if I only had those characters to roll with, I would be totally happy with it. With, like, the Golden Deer, I'm like, I don't want Lorenz, and I don't care about Ignatz and Raphael. If I had to do all the do only Black Eagles, like, I could bench Hubert in a second. But, like, with the Blue Lions, like, yes, all these characters plus Shamir and Catherine, because I'm not, it has to be that way. But that being said, this is my 6th time playing this game. So I'm kind of experimenting just with some of the weird off builds, and I'm not taking the game seriously at all. Like, I'm playing it on normal and I'm level grinding, which is like the two things that the community is like, no, play on hard and don't do that. And I'm like, but I wanna. I think I might start up playing Octopath Traveler again if I can find the time for it. But those are.
I remember you mentioned that.
I enjoy that game, but it's just never, like, I can't bring myself to finish it ever.
Well, you know what we should do is we should play another game of Civilization.
We just dominate the continent, and I'm like, we conquer them through conventional warfare, and then I turn and then I look back and you've got nukes.
Just a few.
Just a few? You're like 12.
Like, Nathan, I need more uranium.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I think I have enough to, like, get some nuclear power plants. You're like, I need uranium. I'm like, solar plants it is. God. Well, anyway, I think that's about all the time we've had. We've been going for about 2 hours now. I'm wondering if that's the length that we're going to go with. But part of this was just figuring out what we even are. We'll decide on a name for this podcast. I kind of like Two Idiots of Approximate Knowledge.
I do like that.
I think that's what we're gonna go with until we figure it out. So, yeah, we'll have our schedule going here pretty soon. I don't know that we'll do every episode on Twitch. We may do some of these just as audio to release in podcast format. My video and audio editing knowledge, weirdly enough, is next to none. So either we'll learn or we'll just pass it all off to Brennan. And I'll try and find other work to do to pick it up. But yeah, if you tuned in live, thank you for listening. If you're watching this after the fact, that's also really awesome. We appreciate it. Who knows what happens. Feel free, if you have stuff that you guys want us to talk about, all that kind of stuff, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Twitter at RobyOneKenobi91, or I think the handle I'm going with is Super Quarantine Viking DX plus Alpha Final Match Edition.
Don't even tell him that.
Or whatever it is.
It's gonna change in a week. I don't know.
And I'll keep you appraised of it. And you can find Brendan at Brendan Brachot on Twitter. Those are two of the places to find us. We'll probably have a Twitter for the podcast setup as well. Huge shout out to, just kind of going down the list, we talked about Cameron and Macy. You can find Cameron at Cameron Alistair, I believe, and Macy at Mrs. Macy Craig. You can find Travis at TG Raven. We've talked about him. His Zoom backgrounds are on point.
That was so great.
If there's other content you guys want to explore, check out the Unlikely Adventures podcast. I know they haven't had an episode in a while, but I've actually been on an
Since
episode
the
of
hostile
that.
takeover.
I should probably listen to that podcast at some point and be like an actual good friend. And yeah, if you guys have other things that we want to plug, we're happy to. We will vet those sources before we do. But and shout out to Wendy's. and the
Oh yeah,
Baconator.
shout out to Wendy's.
Yeah. Anyway.
Fresh never frozen beef. Sponsor us.
Yeah. So
They responded to Travis's tweet.
They did.
as
That
we
was
all-
incredible.
I
So
can't
yeah.
believe that happened.
We'll have our schedule set up whenever we post episodes. I imagine we'll probably end up recording like a weird backlog and just like shoot episodes out into the void. There will be no
Probably.
continuity. Nobody will know what's going on. But we'll number the episodes in case it'll be like a weird time warp scenario. If you guys can put it together, if you guys can connect the threads, don't.
You win a free Wendy's Baconator.
At the price of $8.99.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have a great rest of your evening. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Be good. And eat at Wendy's. Bye.
Bye.